Russia may be one of the areas on this planet that has been laden with incredible amounts of UFO activity since the beginning of time.
These flying machines were seen all over the Soviet Union.
The Soviets knew something about UFOs. They had secrets.
The Soviets have in their possession no less than the remains of 5 crashed and recovered UFOs.
There is undeniable evidence that Russia is sitting on a virtual treasure trove of information that proves that extraterrestrials visited Earth in our distant past.
Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has credited its origins to gods and other visitors from the stars. What if it were true? Did extraterrestrial beings really help to shape our history? And if so, might the ultimate proof be found in Russia's secret files? Moscow, Russia, December 25th, 1991. At 7 p.m., Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev makes a nationally televised address to announce his resignation.
I hereby discontinue my activities at the post of President of the USSR.
Moments later, the Soviet flag is lowered from the Kremlin for the final time. One of the world's 2 superpowers has fallen. From 1922 to 1991, Russia was under the restrictive regime of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which ruled over much of Northern Asia and Eastern Europe. The Soviet government was known for its brutality, oppression, and culture of absolute secrecy.
It was very much a case of everything that happens within government stays within government, and the consequences were lethal. This was a closed, highly secretive society that kept secrets not just, of course, from us in the West, but from its own people.
One of the challenges of defending this vast landmass in Russia is that its borders are very insecure at all points. So in order to conquer space, it has an obsession with national security. Secrecy has become embedded within the political culture, and also many people in Russia agree with the idea that most things should be kept a secret.
When the Soviet Union was dissolved, so too was its main security agency, the KGB. The top-secret KGB files were suddenly vulnerable, with many in the hands of former agents, ready to sell them to the highest bidders. Thousands more were smuggled out by Vasily Mitrokhin, who worked in the KGB's Foreign Intelligence Archive from 1972 to 1984. The documents that have been leaked include KGB information on secret Russian weapons caches, Russian spies, and even UFO reports.
The Soviet Union had a large number of UFO encounters. Western researchers had really no knowledge of what was going on behind the Iron Curtain. We now know that there were thousands and thousands of Soviet UFO cases that were taking place during that time. A number of records did indeed come out, and we now have access to them.
Could the definitive evidence of extraterrestrial contact lie hidden within the secret KGB files that are just now coming to light? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest recent findings reveal the Soviets were not only covering up modern UFO reports, but also proof that aliens visited Earth in the distant past. Leningrad, Russia, December 1st, 1934. Sergei Kirov, a Communist Party leader and rival to fellow party leader Joseph Stalin, is murdered. The assassination marks the beginning of the darkest period in the history of the Soviet Union, the Great Purges. With Kirov gone, Stalin's power grew, and he unleashed a widespread campaign of ruthless political persecution meant to weed out dissenters and consolidate his absolute authority. Among the millions who were arrested and interrogated during this period was respected Russian scientist and philosopher, Dr. Henrik Ludwig.
An incredible human being. This was a person who could speak 20 ancient and modern languages. He had incredible encyclopedic knowledge.
Dr. Ludwig was accused of being a spy for the Vatican and spent decades in one of Stalin's brutal Gulag labor camps. But in 2011, 38 years after his death, an article in the Russian newspaper Sovershchena Sekretna, or Top Secret, revealed the true purpose of Ludwig's work at the Vatican, and possibly also for his arrest.
The reason he was accused of being a spy for the Vatican is because in 1920s, as a young student of architecture, he visited the Vatican, where he was given access to the secret library. In that library, he found manuscripts that describe extraterrestrial civilizations and more.
Dr. Genrikh Ludwig discovered a number of manuscripts suggesting that there had been historic extraterrestrial contact with ancient civilizations in Egypt, Israel, and Mesopotamia. These manuscripts that talked, for example, about the pyramids and described them as energy machines.
When he went back to the Soviet Union, they treated him very poorly, when in fact he was perhaps the greatest of all the early researchers into the whole concept of ancient aliens coming to our planet.
Might Dr. Ludwig have really discovered ancient manuscripts within the Vatican that describe extraterrestrials visiting Earth? Did the Russian government accuse him of espionage in an attempt to suppress his controversial findings? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and claim Ludwig was not the only one silenced by the Soviet government for his research. When Vladimir Lenin seized power in 1917, he established the first state to seek the elimination of religion. The communist regime also actively suppressed a philosophy that had become widespread throughout Russia in the early 20th century: cosmism.
There is a Russian tradition beginning in the late 1800s called cosmism. The cosmists began with a philosopher, a guy named Nikolai Fyodorov, in the 1870s and 1880s, who inspired the father of Soviet rocketry, who actually designed the rockets that put the first man into space. And they believed that human civilization actually had origins in outer space, and that it was our destiny as human beings to move back into space, and we would go back into the cradle of civilization. So this idea was embedded within Russian culture.
Both Lenin and his successor, Joseph Stalin, saw to it that talk of cosmism and humanity's alien origins was silenced. But these ideas would emerge again in 1961, when the Soviet Union successfully launched cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin into orbit and beat the United States at sending the first man to space. Many Russians saw this accomplishment as a fulfillment of man's destiny to return to the stars.
With the successes of the Soviet space program, Sputnik in 1957, the first man in space, simultaneously this kind of kick-started or created anew an interest in investigating alien origins of human civilizations. And after Joseph Stalin died, many of those individuals that were exploring the idea of ancient paleo contacts with aliens were allowed to voice their opinions publicly.
In 1961, Russian physicist and mathematician Modest Agrest published a controversial paper proposing that extraterrestrials had visited Earth's ancient civilizations. Similar theories were also offered by author Alexander Kazantsev and astronomer Yosef Shklovsky. But while these researchers did not suffer the same persecution as those that came before them, they claimed that the Soviet government worked to suppress their theories.
The idea that there were Soviet astronomers who were seriously studying these topics and ideas leads me to think that we're the ones who are onto something. And we are now able to access information that for so many years has remained censored.